Little People, Big World gave us years of family love, drama, and resilience. Fans around the globe watched Amy Roloff rebuild her life, marry Chris Marek, and find happiness after heartbreak. But behind the cameras, shadows were growing. In today's video, we uncover a shocking story, one filled with betrayal, secret affairs, stolen fortunes, and ultimately, justice. Amy Roloff's house sell for $300,000. Chris Marek and Amy Roloff officially separated. Chris Marek cunningly stole Amy Roloff's saved $550,000 and secretly fled. And with the money, Chris Marek goes to his secret girlfriend Jennifer. Chris Marek has been secretly in a romantic relationship with Jennifer for the past 1 year. And finally, Chris Marek arrest. Chris Marek's jail for 6 months. This is not just another celebrity scandal. It's a story of trust broken, money stolen, and a shocking betrayal that rocked the Roloff legacy. It all began with Amy Roloff's decision to sell her charming home for $300,000. To her fans, it looked like a simple real estate move. After all, she and Chris Marek had often spoken about downsizing and starting fresh. Amy, known for her big heart and careful planning, had saved for years. Her financial nest egg of $550,000 was meant for her future, retirement, family gatherings, and perhaps even a legacy for her children. But behind her cheerful smile, Chris Marek had different plans. Unknown to Amy, Chris had been secretly communicating with a woman named Jennifer. Their affair had already stretched past a year, hidden beneath late-night phone calls, business meetings, and unexplained absences. The house sale wasn't just about a new chapter. It was the perfect cover. Chris now had access to large sums of Amy's money, and he knew exactly what to do next. On the surface, Amy Roloff and Chris Marek looked like the perfect couple. Viewers saw them smiling at family dinners, enjoying weekend trips, and even hosting friends at their cozy home. But those closest to Amy began to notice subtle cracks, tiny warning signs that something was not quite right. Chris had grown distant. He was often distracted, his phone glued to his hand, and he would disappear for hours with vague excuses. At first, Amy brushed it off. After all, Chris had his real estate career, and she believed his absences were simply part of the job. But slowly, Amy began to feel a weight in her chest. Nights felt colder, conversations shorter. The man she had trusted after so much heartbreak seemed like he was slipping away. Friends noticed too. At one gathering, Amy's longtime friend Lisa whispered, "Amy, he doesn't look at you the way he used to." Amy laughed it off, but deep down, the words echoed. And then came the financial shift. Chris began insisting that he should manage the couple's savings. He argued that since he understood real estate and investments, he could grow Amy's nest egg into something larger. Trusting him, Amy reluctantly agreed. What she didn't know was that Chris had already begun funneling portions of her $550,000 into accounts she could not access, accounts linked not only to him, but to a woman she had never met. Her name was Jennifer. The affair had already been going on for a year, hidden in shadows and sealed with promises Chris never intended to keep to Amy. Every smile he gave Amy in public, every kiss on camera, it was all part of a mask. A mask hiding a betrayal that would soon erupt into one of the most shocking scandals of Amy Roloff's life. For over a year, Chris Marek had been living a double life. To Amy Roloff, he was the caring husband, the supportive partner, and the man who promised her stability after years of heartbreak. But when he wasn't by Amy's side, he was with Jennifer. Jennifer was younger, vibrant, and knew exactly how to keep Chris hooked. Their romance began quietly, an innocent friendship that sparked during a real estate networking event. At first, their conversations seemed professional, but soon, late-night texts turned into secret meetings, and secret meetings turned into full-blown weekends together. Chris showered Jennifer with gifts, designer handbags, jewelry, and luxury dinners. But these weren't bought with his own earnings. Every single indulgence came from Amy's money. The $550,000 she had carefully saved over years was being drained, piece by piece, to fund a relationship she had no idea existed. Jennifer, knowing Chris' position, played her role carefully. She encouraged him to be independent, telling him he deserved more than living under Amy's financial shadow. She whispered promises of a new life together, a life built not on honesty, but on deceit. The two created elaborate lies. Chris told Amy he had client meetings in nearby cities, when in reality he was checking into luxury hotels with Jennifer. Amy, trusting, never suspected the truth. But Jennifer wasn't just a secret girlfriend. She was a partner in the scheme. She knew about Amy's savings, and she encouraged Chris to take more. Together, they plotted how to siphon the money without raising suspicion. By the time Amy began to question her husband's behavior, almost half of her nest egg was gone. Yet Chris continued smiling, continued lying, and continued holding Amy's hand in public as if nothing was wrong. But secrets have a way of slipping into the light. And soon, Amy would discover the storm that had been building behind her back. Amy Roloff had always trusted her instincts. Life had taught her resilience, and though she often gave people the benefit of the doubt, she knew when something wasn't right. With Chris, the doubts started as whispers in her mind, soft, ignorable, but soon they grew louder. At first, it was the phone calls. Chris would step outside late at night, lowering his voice, pacing back and forth on the porch. When Amy asked who it was, he'd smile casually and say, "Just a client, nothing important." But the calls never ended. Then there were the unexplained receipts. Amy found a hotel invoice tucked inside Chris's jacket pocket. 2 nights at a luxury resort out of town. She asked him about it, but Chris waved it off as business travel. Amy, uneasy but unwilling to spark conflict, let it slide. But deep down, her heart ached. She remembered how Matt Roloff had once made her feel unseen, and she couldn't shake the feeling that history was repeating itself. Her friends noticed too. Lisa, her closest confidant, pulled her aside after a family barbecue. "Amy, something's wrong. I've seen that look before. He's hiding something." Amy tried to brush it off, but her voice trembled when she replied, "I want to believe he loves me, but I don't know anymore." The breaking point came one afternoon when Amy went to transfer money from her savings account. She had carefully kept track of her finances for years, but what she saw made her hands tremble. Nearly $200,000 was missing. At first, she thought it was a mistake, a glitch. She even called the bank, hoping for reassurance. But the banker confirmed the funds had been withdrawn, legally, by Chris Merrick, who had been added as a joint account holder months earlier. Amy's chest tightened. Her mind raced. Where had the money gone? That night, Chris returned home with flowers, acting as if nothing had happened. But Amy could no longer ignore the truth. The man she trusted with her heart and her future wasn't just pulling away emotionally. He was pulling away financially too. And Amy Roloff was about to uncover a betrayal far deeper than she could have ever imagined. Amy Roloff could no longer silence the storm inside her. The missing money, the late-night calls, the strange receipts, all of it pointed to one thing: betrayal. She waited for Chris one evening, determined to confront him. When he walked in with his usual easy smile, Amy didn't greet him with a hug. Instead, she sat at the kitchen table with the bank statements spread out before her. "Chris," she said, her voice steady but cold, "where did this money go?" For a moment, Chris froze. His eyes darted to the papers, then back to Amy. He forced a chuckle. "What are you talking about? That's for investments. Opportunities I've been working on." Amy shook her head. "Don't lie to me. I called the bank. These weren't investments. You've been moving money, our money, into accounts I've never seen." "Why, Chris? Why would you do this?" Chris' mask slipped just for a second. His jaw tightened. "Amy, you wouldn't understand. I've been under pressure. I wanted to build something bigger for us. You don't need to worry. But Amy pressed harder. Don't you dare gaslight me. Where's the money, Chris? Who is she? The room fell silent. Chris's face went pale. Amy had spoken the words he hoped she would never say. Her intuition had been right all along. There was another woman. Chris finally exhaled, his shoulders sinking. He muttered the name almost under his breath, Jennifer. Amy felt her chest shatter. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was personal. The man she had opened her heart to after years of pain had not only stolen from her, but given her future away to another woman. Tears welled in her eyes, but her voice sharpened with resolve. You took my love, my trust, and my savings and gave them to someone else. How could you, Chris, after everything? Chris had no answer. He turned away, ashamed, but not enough to confess the full truth. Amy knew then that this was no longer about saving her marriage. It was about saving herself. And she silently vowed, Chris Merrick would not get away with this. After the confrontation, Amy Roloff couldn't sleep. The name Jennifer rang in her ears like a cruel echo. Who was she? How long had this been going on? And where was Amy's money? Determined to find the truth, Amy began digging. She went through Chris's phone records, his credit card statements, and even the receipts he carelessly left behind. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together, revealing a picture more devastating than she ever imagined. There were charges for expensive dinners at five-star restaurants, jewelry purchases worth thousands, weekend stays at resorts along the Oregon coast, and each one linked back to Jennifer. Amy's hands shook as she flipped through the evidence. It wasn't just casual spending. Chris had built an entirely separate life with this woman, a life funded by Amy's $550,000 savings. Friends began whispering too. One admitted to seeing Chris in town holding hands with a brunette who wasn't Amy. Another recalled spotting him at a winery, laughing with Jennifer as if they were on a romantic getaway. The betrayal was no longer hidden. It was painted across every receipt, every hotel booking, every luxury purchase that Amy herself had unknowingly paid for. And Jennifer, she wasn't some innocent bystander. She was fully aware of where the money came from. She encouraged Chris to take what he deserved and promised him a new beginning, a life free from Amy's shadow. Amy sat in her living room one night, staring at the walls that once felt safe. Every smile Chris had given her now felt like a lie. Every plan for their future now looked like a trap. Her chest ached with heartbreak, but her resolve grew stronger. Chris had not only betrayed her love, he had stolen her legacy. And Amy Roloff, though heartbroken, was no stranger to fighting back. The world would soon know the truth. Amy Roloff had reached her breaking point. For weeks, she carried the weight of betrayal in silence, but now the truth could no longer stay hidden. Chris Merrick's double life, his secret girlfriend, his stolen fortune, his lies, was about to unravel. It started small. Amy confided in her closest friend Lisa, showing her the receipts, the missing money, and the damning evidence of Jennifer. Lisa, furious on Amy's behalf, urged her to protect herself before everything disappeared. "You've got to expose him, Amy," Lisa said firmly. "He's taken too much already. Don't let him take more." Word began to spread quietly among family and friends. Matt Roloff, Amy's ex-husband, heard whispers through mutual connections. Even though their past was complicated, Matt felt a pang of sympathy. Amy didn't deserve this. Meanwhile, Chris continued his charade, dividing his time between Amy's home and Jennifer's arms. But cracks appeared quickly. His excuses grew sloppier. His phone buzzed with messages he forgot to hide. One evening, while Chris was in the shower, Amy saw a text flash across his phone screen. "Can't wait for our trip next week. Love you, Jennifer." Her blood boiled. It was undeniable. The next morning, Amy confronted Chris again, this time not in private despair, but with unshakable fury. She demanded answers, demanded the truth, demanded justice. Chris stammered, trying to weave excuses, but the walls were closing in. Amy made a decision that would change everything. She contacted her lawyer. With the financial records in hand, the betrayal documented, and Chris' reckless spending exposed, Amy began the process of separating not just emotionally, but legally and financially. And soon, what began as whispers among friends turned into headlines. Little People Big World star Amy Roloff's marriage crumbles in scandal. Chris Marek accused of stealing $550,000 from Amy Roloff. The public outrage was instant. Fans who had admired Chris' charm on screen were now shocked by the betrayal. Social media lit up with anger, heartbreak, and disbelief. Chris's double life, carefully crafted for over a year, had collapsed in a matter of days. And Jennifer? She could no longer stay in the shadows. Her name was out, her role undeniable, and the world began to demand answers. For Amy, this wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. This was about justice. And Chris Marek was running out of places to hide. The headlines were impossible to ignore. Within days, Chris Marek's name was splashed across tabloids, blogs, and social media threads. What was once a private betrayal had become a very public scandal. And when large sums of money are involved, it doesn't take long before the authorities start asking questions. Amy's lawyer wasted no time. With bank statements, transfer records, and receipts in hand, a formal complaint was filed. The documents revealed not only the missing $550,000, but also the lavish lifestyle Chris had shared with Jennifer, clear evidence of financial misconduct. The police opened an investigation. Detectives traced the flow of money through multiple accounts, some under Chris' name, others connected to Jennifer. Each transaction painted the same picture. Amy's savings had been siphoned away to fund a secret affair. Jennifer, once a hidden figure, was now thrust into the spotlight. Investigators questioned her role. Was she complicit or merely a bystander swept up in Chris' deception? The receipts told their own story. Her name appeared on hotel reservations, jewelry invoices, and even joint bank account activity. It was undeniable. She wasn't just aware, she was part of it. The public, once charmed by Chris and Amy's love story, turned on Chris with fury. Fans flooded his social media accounts with angry comments. Words like liar, thief, and betrayer filled every post. Jennifer's name, too, became a target of outrage. Meanwhile, Amy faced the storm with courage. Though devastated, she worked closely with investigators, determined not to let Chris escape accountability. Her heartbreak became a mission for justice, not just for herself, but for anyone who had ever trusted the wrong person. Chris, however, grew desperate. He tried to explain away the missing funds as mismanaged investments and misunderstood transactions. But the evidence was overwhelming. His lies, once so carefully constructed, collapsed under the weight of cold, hard facts. By the end of the month, Chris Marek was no longer just a husband accused of betrayal. He was a suspect in an active fraud investigation. And the walls were closing in faster than he ever expected. As the investigation deepened, Chris Marek grew restless. The walls around him were shrinking. Bank accounts frozen, reporters at his doorstep, and Amy's lawyers circling like hawks. It was only a matter of time before the authorities closed in. Jennifer tried to calm him. "Don't panic, Chris. We can get through this. We'll find a way." But her voice lacked conviction. She could see the fear in his eyes. For months, their affair had been about luxury and excitement. Now, it was about survival. Chris began plotting. He withdrew what little money he could still access, stuffing it into envelopes and hiding it in his car. He booked a last-minute rental property under a false name, telling Jennifer they needed to lay low until the storm blew over. But Jennifer's loyalty wavered. The glamorous gifts were gone, replaced by stress and secrecy. She asked him one night, "Chris, was it worth it? Stealing from Amy, throwing away your marriage, your life, for me?" Chris avoided her gaze. He didn't answer, because deep down, he wasn't sure anymore. Meanwhile, Amy stayed strong. She knew Chris well enough to predict his moves. When her lawyer informed the investigators that Chris might try to flee, the police quietly began surveillance. His car was tracked, his phone monitored. Every step he took brought him closer to the net tightening around him. Then came the breaking point. Chris, desperate, attempted to move $50,000 through a shadow account connected to Jennifer's name. It was the final piece of evidence investigators needed. The transfer lit up alarms, and within hours, a warrant was issued for his arrest. Jennifer, terrified, began to distance herself. She stopped answering his calls, stopped meeting him in secret. In the end, the woman he sacrificed everything for turned her back on him when the pressure became too much. And Chris? Alone, cornered, and with nowhere left to run, he faced the inevitable. The law was coming. It was a gray morning in Oregon when the silence shattered. Police cars pulled quietly into the neighborhood, their lights flashing faintly against the damp streets. For weeks, investigators had built their case. Now, they had what they needed: undeniable proof of fraud, theft, and financial misconduct. Chris Merrick had just stepped outside, coffee in hand, when the officers approached. He froze. His heart pounded as they called his name. "Christopher Merrick, you are under arrest for financial fraud and misappropriation of funds." The words cut like knives. His neighbors peeked from behind curtains as officers placed him in handcuffs. The man who once walked proudly beside Amy Roloff, who smiled for cameras and spoke of love, was now escorted into a squad car, his reputation shattered. Jennifer, though not arrested that morning, was also pulled into the spotlight. Detectives arrived at her door, questioning her about her role in the scheme. She denied knowing the full extent of Chris' actions, but the receipts and financial records told a different story. At best, she had turned a blind eye. At worst, she was a willing accomplice. News of the arrest spread like wildfire. Headlines blared across every major outlet. Chris Merrick arrested in financial scandal. Amy Roloff's husband accused of stealing $550,000. Fans were stunned. Social media exploded with outrage. Support poured in for Amy, who remained silent but resolute. Behind closed doors, she wept, not out of love lost, but out of the sheer betrayal of trust. For Chris, the arrest was only the beginning. He now faced the weight of the law, the fury of the public, and the loss of everything he once held dear. As he sat in the holding cell that night, staring at the cold walls, the reality of his actions sank in. Jennifer was gone. Amy had turned against him, and his double life had collapsed into a nightmare of his own making. The man who once dreamed of wealth and romance was now just another criminal awaiting trial. And justice was only getting started. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled every bench. Cameras flashed outside the courthouse, and fans of Little People, Big World anxiously waited for updates. Amy Roloff, though visibly shaken, stood tall as she entered, supported by close friends. This was no longer just a personal betrayal. It was a public trial that would decide Chris Merrick's fate. The prosecution laid out its case with precision. Bank records, transfer slips, and luxury receipts told the story of $550,000 drained from Amy's accounts. Side by side, they displayed photos of Chris and Jennifer at resorts, restaurants, and jewelry stores, all funded by Amy's hard-earned money. Amy trusted him, the prosecutor said firmly, and he exploited that trust for greed and selfish desire. This was not a mistake. This was calculated theft. The defense, on the other hand, tried to paint Chris as a man who had simply made poor financial decisions. They argued that he never intended to harm Amy, that he believed he was investing, and that Jennifer had influenced his actions. But the evidence was too heavy. Then came the most dramatic moment. Jennifer herself was called to the stand. Dressed in black, she shifted nervously under the judge's gaze. At first, she tried to minimize her role, claiming she didn't know where the money came from. But under pressure, the truth slipped out. She admitted Chris had told her about Amy's savings and promised her a new life built on that fortune. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Amy, seated nearby, closed her eyes as tears slid down her cheeks. Every word confirmed the betrayal she had already felt in her heart. Chris avoided her gaze. For the first time, he looked small, his confidence gone, his lies unraveling under oath. When Amy took the stand, her voice was steady but filled with pain. She spoke not only about the money, but about the betrayal of trust, the humiliation, and the emotional scars left behind. Her testimony wasn't just evidence. It was a reminder that behind every crime is a human heart broken. By the end of the week, the jury had heard enough. The case against Chris Marek was overwhelming. And as the gavel struck, the world waited for the verdict that would decide his future. The tension inside the courtroom was suffocating. Every eye was fixed on the jury box as the foreperson rose, a slip of paper trembling slightly in her hand. Chris Marek sat stiffly beside his attorney, his face pale, his lips pressed into a tight line. Amy Roloff, seated just behind the prosecution, clasped her hands together, bracing herself for the words that would decide her ex-husband's future. The judge asked the jury for their decision. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Christopher Marek, guilty." The single word echoed through the room like thunder. Guilty. Chris's shoulders slumped. For the first time, the man who had always carried himself with smooth confidence looked defeated, stripped of the lies that had carried him this far. His attorney placed a hand on his arm, whispering, but Chris didn't respond. Amy closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek, but she didn't cry out. This was not joy, it was relief. The nightmare was finally over. The judge continued. Chris was convicted of fraud, theft, and financial misconduct, crimes that carried a heavy sentence. While the exact punishment would be decided in the coming weeks, it was clear Chris Marek would no longer walk free. Jennifer, too, was not spared. While she avoided prison, the court found her complicit. She was ordered to repay part of the stolen funds and faced restrictions that would follow her for years. Her glamorous image was shattered, her name now forever tied to scandal. As reporters rushed to capture reactions, Amy stood outside the courthouse with quiet dignity. "I didn't want this," she told the microphones. "All I wanted was honesty and love. But when that was taken from me, I had to fight for myself and for what was right." The crowd applauded her strength. To fans, Amy had become more than a TV star. She was a symbol of resilience, proof that even in the face of betrayal, justice could prevail. Chris, meanwhile, was escorted out of the courthouse in handcuffs, cameras flashing as he lowered his head. His dream of wealth, his affair with Jennifer, his carefully built lies, all of it had collapsed. The man who once charmed America was now just another criminal, awaiting sentencing. And Amy Roloff. Though scarred, she walked away stronger, ready to rebuild once again. Weeks passed after the guilty verdict, but the weight of the case still hung over everyone involved. The courthouse once again filled with reporters, fans, and onlookers eager to hear the final outcome. The day had arrived for Chris Marek to learn his fate. Chris entered the courtroom in a prison jumpsuit, shackled at the wrists. The man who once wore tailored suits and smiled for cameras now looked tired, aged, and broken. His once confident stride was gone. He shuffled to his seat, avoiding Amy's eyes. The judge entered, and silence fell. Papers shuffled, the air thick with anticipation. "Christopher Marek," the judge began, "you stand before this court convicted of fraud, theft, and financial misconduct. You exploited trust for personal gain, causing deep emotional and financial harm. This court has reviewed the evidence, the testimony, and the impact on your victim, Amy Roloff." The courtroom held its breath. "For these crimes, you are hereby sentenced to 7 years in state prison and ordered to repay $550,000 in restitution to Amy Roloff." Gasps filled the room. Chris's head dropped into his hands. The reality of his downfall had finally crashed down on him. From a respected husband to a convicted criminal, his life had been destroyed by his own choices. Jennifer, seated quietly in the back, looked pale and shaken. Though she escaped prison time, her name was forever tarnished. Her glamorous life was gone, replaced by whispers of scandal and shame. Amy sat still, her expression calm. For her, this wasn't victory, it was closure. The money could never erase the pain, but justice had been served. She had fought back, and she had won. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed her. She spoke firmly, her voice filled with strength. I've learned that trust is fragile and betrayal cuts deep. But I refuse to let this define me. I will heal, I will move forward, and I will keep living my life with hope. The crowd erupted in support. Amy had endured betrayal, humiliation, and loss, but she walked away with her dignity intact. Chris, meanwhile, was led out through a side door, chains rattling with each step. His story had ended not with wealth and love, but with bars and regret. The trial was over, the sentence delivered, but the story didn't end there. What followed were the long, painful ripples of betrayal that touched every life connected to Chris Marek's downfall. For Chris, prison was a harsh awakening. Gone were the luxuries, the romantic escapes, and the carefully crafted lies. He now lived in a gray world of routine, isolation, and regret. Other inmates saw him not as a man of charm, but as another criminal stripped of dignity. The walls that confined him were a constant reminder of the life he had thrown away. Jennifer, too, faced consequences beyond the courtroom. Once seen as Chris's glamorous secret, she now carried the label of homewrecker and accomplice. Friends distanced themselves, business opportunities vanished, and her name was forever linked to scandal. She spent her days trying to disappear from public view, but the shadow of the trial followed her everywhere. Amy, on the other hand, chose a different path. Though wounded, she embraced healing. She focused on her family, her grandchildren, and her personal projects. Fans rallied around her, sending thousands of messages of support. To many, Amy had become a symbol of strength, a woman who had faced betrayal and still found the courage to stand tall. Her $300,000 house, once a symbol of stability, no longer felt like a place of sorrow. Instead, she turned it into a fresh start. Every corner she redecorated, every wall she painted, was part of reclaiming her life from the ashes of betrayal. But the scars remained. Amy admitted in an interview months later, "It wasn't just the money. It was the trust, the love I thought I had, and the future I believed in. That's what hurt the most. But I've learned I'm stronger than I ever thought." The public, too, learned from the scandal. It wasn't just a tabloid headline anymore. It was a story of trust broken, justice served, and the resilience of a woman who refused to let betrayal define her. Chris sat behind bars. Jennifer faded into obscurity. But Amy Roloff continued to rise, her story no longer one of heartbreak, but of survival and strength. The world moved on, but the lesson remained clear: no lie lasts forever, and no betrayal escapes the truth. Months had passed since the verdict, and the storm that once dominated headlines slowly began to fade. Yet for those at the center of it, the impact remained. Inside prison, Chris Marek struggled with the reality of his choices. Gone were the cameras, the affection of fans, and the luxuries Amy's money once bought him. Days blended into nights, each one a reminder of the greed and deceit that had destroyed his life. Letters from Jennifer stopped coming. The promises of love that once lured him into betrayal vanished the moment he lost everything. He was alone, with nothing but regret for company. Jennifer herself became a ghost. She avoided the media, cut ties with old friends, and tried to escape the shadow of the scandal. But whispers followed her wherever she went. To many, she would always be the woman who stood beside Chris as he drained Amy's life savings. Amy, however, chose healing. She poured her energy into family dinners, charity work, and reconnecting with her passions. Fans admired her resilience, and she found new purpose in inspiring others who have faced betrayal and heartbreak. In interviews, she spoke with grace, never dwelling on revenge, but always emphasizing strength and hope. One evening, Amy stood in her garden, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The past still weighed on her, but it no longer defined her. Chris's betrayal was a chapter in her life, not the whole story. She had survived, rebuilt, and emerged stronger. In her memoir, released a year later, she wrote, "Pain changes us, but it doesn't have to break us. Betrayal hurt me deeply, but it also taught me the value of resilience. I choose not to let bitterness win. I choose to keep moving forward." The world had watched her heartbreak, but they also witnessed her healing. And in the end, Amy Roloff's story wasn't about the man who betrayed her. It was about the woman who overcame it. Chris remained behind bars, Jennifer faded away, but Amy's legacy grew brighter than ever. Her story closed not with tragedy, but with triumph. More update. Amy Roloff admits pain of Matt and Karen relationship. Even though Little People, Big World star Amy Roloff has moved on with Chris Marek, her relationship with Matt Roloff is far from over. This is particularly the case now that Matt and Karen Chandler have announced their engagement. So, what is Amy's true emotional state? No one should be surprised if Amy and Matt Roloff irritate one another. Even in the most recent moments, while they attempt to organize a fundraiser, fans of Little People Big World can sense that. Even after Amy and Matt have moved on with other people, they continue to bicker. This has persisted for years. There should not be an excess of hands in the kitchen, as the old adage puts it. In all of Amy and Matt's endeavors, there is incessant competition for control. Given the intensity of their arguments, it is easy to overlook the fact that they were ever a couple. After committing to someone for 28 years, having 4 children together, and building a lasting bond, it is hard to cut ties with them. A frequent gathering place for Amy, Chris, Matt, and Karen Chandler is Roloff Farms. Amy Roloff continues to use Matt's last name, and they will remain linked indefinitely through their offspring and great-grandchildren. In a recent scene from Little People Big World, Amy Roloff even admitted that things are still sort of weird when she is with her ex-husband. Amy continued by saying that she is not interested in learning about the intricacies of Matt and Karen's engagement or relationship. Holding on to drama, she added, was not required. There was a lot of uproar in early episodes of Little People Big World about the fact that Amy's engagement ring is smaller than Karen Chandler's. Despite her efforts to dismiss it, it was clear that this irritated her slightly. When asked about her memories of Matt Roloff, Amy Roloff is forthright and says they will remain with her forever. "Until the day I die, it will always impact," Amy commented. "Just do the best you can," as she put it. Additionally, Amy was unhappy that Matt had decided to transform their Roloff Farms property into a vacation rental. They brought up their children in this house. Instead of short-term visitors, she thinks a family should call it home. Amy has claimed that she tries her best to be cordial in her encounters with Karen Chandler, even though many viewers of Little People Big World may see animosity, if not hatred, between the two. Whether Amy wants it or not, Matt will always be the one who links her to Karen Chandler. "Amy and I will always have Matt in common, the good, the horrible, and everything in between," Karen recently said. "We have both been with Matt forever." Amy and Matt Roloff are friendly exes on a date at the farm with their new loves. During Roloff Farms pumpkin season, Amy, Matt, Chris Marek, and Karen Chandler all got back together, as did their respective partners. The Roloff twins, Amy and Matt, got together to welcome fall with a bang. This past Thursday, 60-year-old Matt shared an Instagram photo of himself and his fiancée Karen Chandler, along with Amy and Chris Marek, who are married to each other. Seated on haystacks amid pumpkins at the Roloff Farms were their son Matteo, his wife Isabel, and their son Jacob, who happened to be the son of Matt and Amy. Adding to the joy, a stunning dog also joined in the festivities. It appears that filming for their annual autumn festival wrapped up over the weekend. This is it, the first weekend of pumpkin season in 2023. According to the Little People Big World star, a big success despite the tough supply chains and wild economics. Fortunately, filming took place on Saturday, so you can all enjoy the experience from the comfort of your own homes when you watch it later. 2. A major revelation is coming out soon concerning his farm, he continued. My deepest gratitude goes out to Amy, Chris, Jacob, Tori Roloff, and the rest of our incredible crew for all they do to ensure that our autumn festival takes place each and every year. Upon Amy and Matt's 2016 divorce, she departed Roloff Farms in 2023, after spending a lot of time with her ex-husband overseeing pumpkin season and raising their 4 children. Amy left the house she had lived in for many years, taking with her her 32-year-old twins, Zach and Jeremy, her 29-year-old daughter Molly, and her 25-year-old son Jacob. On the other hand, she came back in 2021 to wed Marek at Roloff Farms in Hillsboro, Oregon. The summer wedding was a no-show for Matt and Chandler, even though Matt is the sole proprietor of Roloff Farms. At first, I assumed that inviting Matt and Karen to come live with us was an obvious next step when he offered us the farm. If they would like to, there is no pressure. The previous episode of Little People, Big World had Marek saying. However, with further reflection, I realized that it would provide some uncomfortable situations for certain guests during the wedding, particularly Amy. Though this was the case, Matt played a key role in getting Roloff Farms ready for the wedding. Matt was racing at full speed to complete a building on the property before the ceremony. He later shared images of Roloff Farms when it was ready, saying that it had never looked so good. No more today. What are you thinking about this gossip today? Let us know in the comments, and stay tuned by subscribing to our channel to get more updates like this. Thank you.